everyone, I thought I'd give you another quick update on how the Garden Themed Journal of Stitchery is progressing. And as you saw from the last video, I'm on this window page, which is the sister one to the window bike page, as I'm calling it now. So the last thing you saw was the window frame, and I finished stitching around the frame now. I did that in split back stitch. But as you saw from the previous photos, I started to do a little bit of sketching work here for the flowers that I'm going to do on the windowsill. And for that, all I used is this Friction marker pen. This is 0.51. I really like using this. It's got a very, very fine, delicate nib. I'm not sure if you can see that. And it's really brilliant for doing marks on your fabric. So all I've done is I've stitched over the lines that I've done, but I'm not sure if you can see here where I've done the little purple flower heads. You might just be able to see the stems coming out from the bottom of each of the flowers, and that's still in the Friction marker pen. Now I will be stitching over that in due course, so it won't be seen, but the rest is all covered up. Now what I thought I would do is just do a couple of little stems of this vegetation that's hanging down from the bottom of the windowsill, and it will be the same as this one on the sister page. I've just done some split back stitch, and then I will go in with some tiny little French knots dotted all over it. But I thought what I would do is I would draw in perhaps another stem down here, and then I will stitch that. Also go in and use the pink and do some more of these whipped wheels that are supposed to represent little roses, and I thought perhaps I'd do another one in this area up here so that you could see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to pull the camera down a little bit for you, and I'm hoping that's going to be good enough for you to see. So what I'm going to do is just a rough line, just gently stroke down my page with the pen. That's all. I'm just wondering whether I could do a little bit. Don't want to clutter up this area too much. Maybe another little bit down in here, just like that. And as you saw, all I did was touch the fabric with the pen. Now for the whipped roses, all I do is I do a little dot, which is my center, and then I try and do 5 little even spaced spokes coming out of it. There we go. Hope you can just see that there. And that's all I need. And then these are the 2 little lines that I mentioned a moment ago. So I've got some threads laid out here. Now I'll put the details of what the threads are in the description box below the video. This is a variegated thread, and it's one of the chameleon threads that I got from Lorna Bateman. This one is 819, and it's a DMC floss or stranded cotton, and then this is another Lorna Bateman, but this is a Perlé 12, and I've used that for these little flower pods up here. So I've got just a simple little knot at the end of my thread, and I'm going to go in now. I'm hoping I can get this close enough to the camera and close enough to my eyes so that you can see what I'm doing. And as I've mentioned before, I'm just going in with split back stitch, but this first stitch is just a tiny little stitch just to add, I've done one down here just to add a little bit of detail. So let's try and do this. So I'm just making a stitch, going forward a little bit, following the line that I've just drawn with the Friction marker pen. Just trying to be careful to pick up the line, and then I'm just going to go down through the stitch that I've just done. Now you've seen me do split back stitch oodles of time, so I'm not going to do much. I'm trying to keep my stitches very small because I want this to look fairly delicate. But same as when I did the split back stitch with the door, I don't have to be too precise because this is supposed to be almost like twiggy vegetation, so it doesn't have to be particularly smooth. Up here I tried to get it up here Sorry, I'm off camera there. Up here, I tried to get it as smooth and straight as I could, but down here for the vegetation, I'm not that bothered about it being absolutely perfect. And just one last little stitch to go in here. There we go. Now, whoops, got a little thread caught there. Is that going to let me through? Yeah, there we go. Now, as you can see, I've gone off at various places along my little strands with odd stitches. Now, sometimes I've gone in and done a straight stitch for those, so I'm going to do one here. Sometimes I've gone in with a few more. Actually, I won't do a straight stitch because I've come away from the main stem a little bit too far. If I'm fairly close, then what I'll do is a single straight stitch. If I'm a little distance away, then I'll do a few more little tiny back stitches or split back stitches. So I'm just going to go off to one side and just angle my stitch up there like that. And that's all I'm going to do on that one. So I'm going to finish off my thread on the reverse, and then I'm going to come in and quickly do this one for you. Actually, I might put in another little stitch down here at the bottom, just so that it's not level. There we go. So I'm just going to finish this off on the back. And as you can see, it's quite messy on the back. That'll all be covered up in due course. So, just doing a little quilter's knot. And I'm going to come in and do this little bit, as I've mentioned. Now you can stitch top to bottom if you want to, or bottom to top, whichever you please. It doesn't really matter. Right. Sorry, I'm off camera there again. So I'm just going to come up a little bit away. There we go. Now I'm working, as I always seem to be saying, in a single strand of DMC, so it is quite difficult to see where your stitch is and to split it. But there's nothing to stop you doing it in a heavier weight cotton, if that's what you want, or thread, or to even use more threads. You don't have to work in one thread by any means. That's just what I'm working in, and that's just what I prefer to work in for these. So there we go, that's this little one done. Now what you're probably seeing most of here is the actual line that I've drawn in, but those lines will disappear when I iron over this. And I've got a couple of little areas here. There's one line that I've missed and another one here. So I'm just going to finish off my thread and then do those two pieces, and then I'll go on to doing this whipped wheel there. Perhaps another one down in here. See, I'm getting carried away now already, aren't I? So this one I'm going to do just a couple of little split back stitches for this one. So I've come away quite a distance from the main stem. There we go. I'm just going to leave that like that, and as I say, finish it off on the back with those little anchor knots. Do need to do some snipping away of threads here on the back from previous stitches. I'm just going to put another little knot in that last piece of thread, because I will go in this area here and just build up some vegetation, and as you can see, I've used odd little bits of the thread just to make some tiny little French knots, and it just builds up the colour variation in the area. So I've got some of the 819 thread, and again a single strand. So I've got a quilter's knot in the back, and I'm just going to come up at the end of one of those little spokes. So we're doing this little knot here, or this little spoked area here. So I've come up at the outside of one of those little spokes, and I'm going to go down again at the end of the one next door to it. Now I'm going to come up in the center and just catch that loop, and then I'm going to go down in the center again, like that. And then I'm going to come up at the end of another one of the little spokes, go down with the one next door to it, come up in the middle again, there's my loop off to the left, so I'm just going to catch that by putting my needle underneath it, draw it tight to the center, and then go down again. And then because we've done 5 spokes, I've just got this last little one here, so I'm going to come up at the end of that one and go down in the center again. Okay, so those are the 5 spokes connected to the center. Now what you want to do is come up in the center again, but slightly off to one side. Because if you come up in the same place, obviously your thread that you've just taken down will pull out again. So I've just come up off to one side of the center, and now all I'm going to do is I'm going to go under one of the spokes, over the next one, just going to turn it round. So I've gone under this spoke here, I'm going over the next one, which is just there, and under the one after that. So effectively all you're doing is going up and under one spoke and over the next, and you're working your way round doing that. Now as you go, because you've got 5 spokes, the one you went under last time you go over this time, and it doesn't really matter if you go wrong because it's not going to show. You do this so many times that it all gets hidden and pulled in together. Now if you're doing a single DMC thread like I am, it can take quite a while. So these are sometimes done a little bit more quickly if you work with 2 strands or more strands, or if you're working in a thicker embroidery thread like a 12 perlé, and certainly even more if you were certainly even quicker rather, sorry, if you were working in an 8 or a 3 perlé. But I don't really mind how long these take. I mean, they don't take long at all. I'm doing this quite slowly so that you can see what I'm doing. And also another trick is to actually turn your needle around so that you're using the eye end of your needle to go through these. Now that's another way of doing it. I don't mind either way really, because I'm talking, I've lost track of what I've done, but that's okay. The longer your spokes, the longer obviously your or the bigger rather your whipped rose is going to be, and it doesn't really matter here if I decide I want to do a tiny little one and my little spokes are still showing, because as you know this is going to be a really dense area of vegetation or leaves, so I can easily cover up those little spokes anyway, so it's not too much of an issue. And as you can see here, I've still got some of the Friction marker pen showing, but that'll all get covered up, as I say, as soon as I've finished embroidering and I apply a little bit of heat. I'm just going to turn that round. As soon as I apply a little bit of heat, that's the magic of the Friction marker pen, my markings will all disappear. So it makes life so much easier for trying to draw and trace designs on fabric these days. So I'm going to finish this little rose off. Not all my spokes are covered. Let me just, there we go. Not all my spokes are covered, as you can probably see. But as I said, I'm not bothered about that. I can hide that with some leaves. So all I'm doing is just taking my thread to the reverse, flipping it over and doing one of those little tiny knots on the back, just to finish it off. There we go, like that. And again, I'm just going to save this little bit of thread because I can do, again, some French knots in amongst that vegetation just to give some more colour. And let's turn that up the right way, it does help. And that's what that looks like now, everybody. If you'd like to see me do one of these, I can do one very quickly for you. So I need to thread up a needle. I didn't think about that. And what I do need to do is decide where I want to put one. So it's getting quite full, this little one. So why don't I just have, I could have one off to the side here. So all I've done is I've gone across my threads for my window, and I'm just doing kind of like a little oval. Sorry, that's not the best place to try and draw one to show you, but I think that's probably about the only place I could put one, really, because it's getting quite tall here. So let me thread up a needle very quickly. There we go. I haven't got much thread because I'm only going to be doing one little tiny bud down here. Now, these are a variation on a detached chain stitch. There is a proper name for the stitch that I'm going to do, but this is my variation on it. So what you could do, and what I did start off doing, was to do a detached chain stitch and then put a single straight stitch in the middle of it. But it wasn't really giving me the dimension that I wanted for those buds. I then started doing a second detached chain over the top of those stitches that I'd just done. But I actually found that if I did my straight stitch first and then went in and did my detached chain, so that's what I'm going to do. I think some people call them lazy daisy stitches. That's what I learnt them as, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just started my detached chain at the base of that straight stitch, and I'm ending it at the other end. And that actually, if you see, I hope you can, that actually just kind of catches that straight stitch in the middle, and then I'm going down again where that straight stitch ends, and that gives me quite a nice little dome for a bud there. Now on one or two, like this one here, I want that one just relatively flat to give a bit of variety to the flowers or the buds that I'm working. But if I wanted to add more dimension, then I could come up again at the base of that straight stitch and do another detached chain in exactly the same place. So I'm going to do that now, and this will give me quite a nice thick bud. Now I'm struggling a little bit to come up because I'm working over several layers here, so I'm just going to make the loop and do it as a stab stitch more than a complete stitch where I start and finish my stitch all in one go. So there's my lazy daisy stitch or my detached chain, and I'm going back down again. There we go. And that gives quite a nice little dome to the bud, and I really like that look. It gives you almost a look of tulips that are closed. So that's what I've done on a lot of these, not all of them. As I say, I've just done one there and not 2 detached chain stitches, and I think that's another one, that's another one, and that's another one. So I've just done a little bit of a variety of those. So there we go. I'm just going to end off this thread as well. Okay, so that's where I've got to so far, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in with some greens in and around this area and fill up the vegetation like I've done on this one. And as you can see, I've interspersed the vegetation with little French knots, so I will do that in the leftover pink here, and also in some of the white that I take down here and use as little flowers in this area on this part of the vegetation. And actually, before I do that, I need to do the stems to the tulips, so I'm going to do those next and do just simple straight stitches for those, and then come in with the rest of the vegetation here. So I'll be back in a little while to show you how I do those. I've just lifted out one of the greens out of my stash of embroidery threads, and sorry, it's one of those without a number on again. I am very good these days at marking everything up, but there are a few old threads, as you can see, where I've got only a few little bits of thread left on them, where I actually haven't kept a number or put the number on, or the numbers come off. So apologies for that, but it's just a shade of green. It doesn't really matter because I'll be using 3 or 4 shades of green in here to try and build up a depth of colour. So I've got a little quilter's knot in the end of my thread again, and all I'm going to do is do some simple little straight stitches. What I should have mentioned perhaps though was that this time round I've actually got 2 strands of thread in my needle. So all I'm doing is straight stitches. I'm not going right into the centre here because obviously that's going to be built up with vegetation, but some I'm trying to make a little bit longer than others. And if I have a big curve on my stem, then I could resort to doing either stem stitch or split back stitch, but for these I'm quite happy to just really go with a nice straight stitch, nice and easy, and it soon builds up. I was asked the other day if I work these in a hoop. Well, obviously, as you can see, I'm not working in a hoop. My preference would always be to work my embroideries in a hoop because I find it keeps the tension nice, but I can't really do that with these little ones, just simply because the size of fabric that I'm working on is too small to fit it in the hoop. Most of the time I'm holding it like this. These are just supporting the fabric. This one is holding and it's opposite my thumb. So if I just turn it that way, maybe you can see that I've actually got my thumb and my little finger holding my fabric, trying to give me my tension. This finger as well is also giving me some tension there, and these two at the back here are really just supporting my my fabric. So there we go, that's all I'm going to do, simple straight stitches for those. And the joy of this is that obviously you can always go back and do more if you want to. So I'm just going to finish off my thread. I'm going to go in now and start building up all my leaves in this area. So the first thing I'm going to do is do some stitches underneath each of the roses. And again, all I'm doing is detached chain stitch. Struggling really to see with the angle I'm trying to work at here, so please excuse me, I'm having to turn my pieces around quite a bit so that I can catch the light and also see what I'm doing. So there we go, there's another one. Got some little ones off here, so I'm going to work those. And I'm not necessarily working my stitches in a set place underneath each one because I'm not particularly bothered, just so long as I kind of have leaves coming out to one side of them. Some of them I'm going to be pulling fairly tight, like those two that I've just done here. This one, as you can see, I've done fairly loose, I hope you can see that. And I'm also not bothered where two are close together. Sorry, I need to just angle that so I can see it a little bit better. As I was saying, I'm not too bothered where I've got two close together if my leaf that I'm trying to sew goes over one of them, because you would find that happening anyway. So there we go, I hope you can see that little one that I'm just doing. So I'm just going to go down in there, and I'm going to work the one here. And I'm just going to carry on doing these lovely, very easy detached chains all over. So this is what the piece looks like now that I've embroidered all through this section here, and I'm just going to hold it up to the camera. I will put some close-up photos on here so that you can have a quick look, but all I've done is I've gone all over this area with those detached chain stitch in various shades of green, and then I went in with some French knots, but as you can see there's one or two places just there, as you can see, and there's a few more dotted around where I've actually done some of the detached chain stitch in some of the pinks. Now obviously you saw me do the whipped wheels to form the roses. The rest of everything else in here is just French knots. So I do the vegetation, the green first, and as I say, in various shades of green. Some of them I work on top of each other. The size of them is round about 2 millimeters, but I work small, and as I've said, I'm only working in 1 or 2 strands of the DMC thread, so I need to work fairly small for using thread that fine. So I work some on top of each other to build up a bit of texture, and as you know, I've worked over the split back stitch that I did for the window outlining. Going back to how I've built this up, as I said, I do the detached chain stitch, some on top of each other, some side by side, just very randomly. Roughly from the windowsill line downwards, I've worked in that direction, and then up towards the top above this line, I've worked in that direction going up, and then over the top I've just gone in with some tiny French knots in 2 and 3 wraps. For these tiny little ones down here, I've gone with a single strand of the DMC thread and mostly 2 wraps of the thread round the needle to create just that tiny little look of vegetation. I wanted to keep that really soft and delicate down there. So what colours have I used? Well, I used this chameleon thread, which is one from Lorna Bateman's website. As you can see, I've got a little piece of paper popped in here. I don't have many of these chameleon threads, so I leave the paper wrapper from the skein tucked underneath the thread as I'm actually winding it onto the spool. It's not ideal, and that's the old way that I used to mark up all my DMC threads. As you can see, this is an old spool cover or skein, paper skein wrapper. And this is how I used to do it in the past, but it's not ideal because I have many where I've lost the actual wrapper it comes out. So it's not ideal. With the DMC threads, I will use their number stickers and just put it along the top there. But as I only have a few of Lorna Bateman's threads, then I've resorted to my old method of popping them on there like that. I could put the number for the chameleon thread on there, and this one is 135, but I don't want to confuse it with the DMC threads that I've got. And actually, when I see one of these wrappers, I know it's a camellia thread. Somebody's also asked me how I keep my threads wrapped so nicely around my spool. Well, when I start off wrapping my thread on the spool, I put the first end actually through the circle on my spool. I hold it down with my thumb and then carry on wrapping round. Now I do have a thread wrapper, but I find it just as easy to wrap these without putting the spool on a thread wrapper. I just hold it and do it by hand. So I hold the loose thread that I've poked through the hole here, and then I just wrap round. And then when I get to the end, I've worked it so that my end comes down to, if I just push that down a little bit, comes down to this end here. And if I just catch that, there's my thread. So if you imagine I've just wrapped all my thread on my spool, I would bring it down, and then when I've got about 2 inches, I just use these little prongs here at the bottom, like everybody else does. Nothing original here at all in my world. And then I take, just come through there. There we go. And then, as you can see, I've got a tiny, tiny little tail there. And all I do with my embroidery scissors is I just catch that thread and just push it underneath all the other threads on the spool. And I tend to do that whenever I've taken off a length of embroidery thread. I just tuck it under there, and then I drop it into my storage box, and it stays fairly neat and tidy, and it will carry on working like that even when you haven't got much on your spool. And as you can see, I'm getting to the end of this one. So here you can see I've just this is where I've started off my my thread before I wrapped anything round here. And if I'm actually using this method of identifying which threads I've got, when I put my thread through here and hold it down with my thumb, I put the wrapper underneath my thumb. So I sandwich the thread between the spool and the wrapper, and then my thumb goes on top to hold it all, and then I start wrapping. I find it easier doing that than trying to slide it in underneath my threads when I've completed wrapping them all the way around the spool. So just a few little mentions there of what I tend to do. Okay, so what am I going to do next? Well, I'm going to go away and try and find that idea that I wanted to do down here. As you can see, I've got a couple of little age spots, a couple there and 2 there from this fabric. I don't mind that at all. My designs tend to be worked an inch off the bottom, so to actually take a design over to that corner might be too much, but you never know, I might come up with something that actually will cover that up. But if it doesn't, I'm not bothered at all. It's not a pristine little fabric journal, this one. Also, what I need to do is I need to do my shutters here. So for that, all I'm going to do is again use my Frixion marker pen. Now I could go in and just stitch straight stitches across to form the shutters, but I can't draw a straight line, I can't cut a straight line, I can't sew a straight line. So what I'm going to do is just do some little lines like this. And these really don't have to be perfect, and if they're not perfect and I don't like them, then I can try altering it as I stitch, and then these lines will just disappear. Those are a little bit too close together, so I'm just trying to keep them nice and random. And there we go. And now I'll go in with my thread, the same colour as I've outlined the shutters with, and just do straight stitches over those. I'm not going to do those in split back stitch. Straight stitch is absolutely fine, and I probably will go in with my coloured pencils because I'm finding I'm enjoying using the coloured pencils rather than the paints when I come to doing shading or background on these. Okay everybody, so I'm going to set to and do those little bits of stitching, and I will come back to you when I have an idea of my design down here. So this is how my piece is looking now, and as you can see I've decided on the design that I want to put down at the bottom. Sorry, I've got a little bit of fraying going on there. Just snip that away. I thought I would try and do a couple of wooden pots or half barrels, and this is supposed to be a little trug or basket down there. For this, all I did was hand draw a couple of little pots. I went round the outside of both of them in split back stitch, and similarly for the bands on the barrel I did exactly the same, and then I just went in with straight stitch in between the bands, just trying to get my stitches as close together as I could. Both of these are variegated perlays, and this one obviously had a shot of blue going through it. I like the texture that it gives me as well. When I finished doing the satin stitch between the bands, I then went back in with some more DMC thread to go over the bands to give a bit more of a cleaner edge where my satin stitch hadn't quite gone underneath or given me the look that I wanted when it met the actual bands. So this is all ready now for me to start embroidering, and I thought that I would go with hydrangea heads, the same as I did on this one. But for this, I think I worked primarily in DMC threads, and all I've done, if I hold it up to the camera, I hope you can see, all I've done is French knot upon French knot, working each one individually, and then when I've laid down what I think is enough, then I'll work some more on top to really build up the dimension. And I'm hoping that you can maybe see the dimension I've got there. It's not much, probably 2, maybe 3 millimeters for each flower head, but I like the way that it actually gives that kind of domed look. You could go in and you could snip the back and actually put some padding behind and do that effect, but given that these are so small, I didn't want to do that. I suppose I could have done one big cut and padded the whole lot, but then I actually like the look of each of these looking like they're doming. So I hope that all makes sense. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do the same thing for these two. And I've got a selection of threads here. Now these two are Steph Francis silk threads, and they are the extra fine. These are some of the Lorna Bateman chameleon threads, and these are perlays, but they're the finest perlay weight that you can get, which is a 12 weight pearly. So I've got a lovely selection of those to use. This little trug down here, I'm still working on that one. This little trug, I'm trying to do a little bit of weaving on it. So I've gone across it horizontally with 2 strands, as you can see here, of DMC thread. And now what I'm doing is going vertically picking up 3 strands at a time. So I'm weaving over 3 strands, then under the next 3 strands, over the next 3 strands. And I'm hoping that that will give me a lovely woven look. I'm just going to do split back stitch over the top for the handle. I will be going round the outside of the little trug when I finish the weaving with a stem stitch, and I'm planning to put some flowers just lying across the top, so there'll be a lot of straight stitches for the stems, and then depending on what flowers I go for, maybe some more French knots, I don't know. So that's my plan for where this is going. As you can see, I still haven't managed to do my slats up here, but I will do. And yeah, I'm quite pleased with how it's going. So I will come back in a little while again, sorry. So I'll come back to you in a little while with the magic of YouTube, showing how I've got on with this weaving. It is a little bit fiddly to do, I have to say, and I was struggling trying to do it last night with the light that was available, even though I stitch with a daylight lamp immediately by the side of me in the lounge. So I stopped, and I'll pick it up again in a moment or two, and I'll show you what it looks like, obviously, when I've done that. So I will be back in a little while for you to see how I'm getting on. This is how my piece is looking now, everybody. I went in and did a whole host of little tiny French knots here on top of my barrels, then added in some leaves. I went ahead and did the basket, and then just some straight stitches for my stems here, little French knots here, and a few little leaves just to try and make it look like they were plant stems. And then my usual thing, I just went in with some very loose or messy French knots, as I call them, mixed in with some turkey work, which obviously I snipped. And that's how the piece is looking now. So if I bring in this one next door, you could see that's what they look like as a pair together. I am wondering whether or not to go in with the hollyhocks, and I'm still thinking that I need to do that. Not necessarily to tie it in with this page, because there's enough going on here and here that is mimicked on this one, but just really to tie these elements in together. So I went with my instinct to stitch some hollyhocks on either side of the window, and I'm glad I did, because if I bring in the sister page, then I think the two sit much better together now that those hollyhocks are in place. In retrospect, I probably would not have done one on either side here now that I've put it with this one, because it does feel like it's too similar to this page, but I did. There's nothing I can do about it now, and I'm going to call this page finished now, and I'm going to move on to my last page in my garden themed journal of stitchery. And you might remember this one, I still need to do a sister page. So I've got my background fabric all nicely prepared there. As you know, they're vintage handkerchiefs that I've been using. So what am I going to do on this page? Well, I'm not 100% certain still what the design is going to be. I know that it will have some elements from this page carried forward onto this one, which is what I've done on all of them. And I'm thinking the wall, I really enjoyed stitching that wall, so I'm thinking I will carry the wall along. What's going to be on the other side, I don't know. It could just be a garden, or it might be another tree like this and a field. I don't know, we'll see. But what I will do is go away and draw out that design using my Friction marker pen, and I will come back and show you and make a start on the sewing so that you can see what's happening and see how this one progresses. Until the next video, take care everybody, have a great week, bye bye now.